My name is Bernice, I'm 29, and I've always been the responsible one in my family. My younger brother Dylan, he's 24, and has always been my parents' golden child despite his track record of mess-ups. But nothing prepared me for that shocking call last Tuesday. Dylan had crashed his brand new Tesla my parents bought him, and now they were asking me to take the blame. I still remember the disbelief turning to anger as I held the phone. Before I continue my story, where are you watching from today? Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to deal with family drama that crossed the line. I grew up in a beautiful upper middle class neighborhood in Greenwich, Connecticut. Our house wasn't the biggest on the block, but it was certainly impressive with its colonial style architecture manicured lawn and the pool my parents had installed when I was 12. My father, James, built a successful career as a corporate attorney, while my mother, Allison, became one of the top real estate brokers in our county. From the outside, we were the picture-perfect American family, but inside our home, the dynamic was far from balanced. From as early as I can remember, there was always a clear difference in how my parents treated Dylan and me. When I was 8 and Dylan was 3, I received a simple art set for Christmas, while he got an elaborate train set that took up half our basement. My father spent weeks helping Dylan set up those tracks, while barely acknowledging my watercolor attempts that hung on our refrigerator. For my 16th birthday, I received driving lessons and was told I could use the family's older Honda when I passed my test. When Dylan turned 16, he got a brand new Jeep Wrangler with all the upgrades. My parents explained that times were better financially now and that boys need their independence earlier. I didn't argue, even though I knew my father had just received a massive bonus the year I turned 16, too. I learned early on that the path to my parents' approval was through achievement and self-sufficiency. While they celebrated Dylan's mediocre grades with ice cream trips, I received only nods of acknowledgement for my straight A's. "That's just what we expect from you, Bernice," my mother would say, as if excellence was the minimum requirement for me, while any effort at all from Dylan deserved a parade. This pattern continued into our teenage years. When I was caught breaking curfew once by 30 minutes after studying late at the library, I was grounded for 2 weeks. When Dylan came home drunk at 16, my parents treated it as just a phase and merely restricted his driving for a weekend. I grew accustomed to the double standard and poured my energy into academics. By senior year of high school, I had a clear plan: study accounting at State University, graduate with honors, and build a career that would provide me the independence I craved. I worked part-time throughout college at the university bookstore, and as a teaching assistant determined to rely on my parents as little as possible. Dylan's post-high school journey looked vastly different. He started at an expensive private university that my parents happily paid for, only to drop out after one semester, claiming it wasn't the right fit. They supported his decision, funding his gap year, that somehow stretched to 2 years of traveling and finding himself. He then enrolled in community college, lasted a semester before transferring to another private university, where he lasted just over a year before dropping out again. Through each of these educational attempts, my parents continued to fund his apartment, car, and lifestyle without question. Meanwhile, I graduated with honors, secured an entry-level position at a respected accounting firm in Boston, and began building my career. I lived in a modest apartment with a roommate, paid off my student loans aggressively, and visited home only on major holidays. Each visit reminded me why I had created distance, as conversation inevitably centered around Dylan's latest endeavors, regardless of how short-lived they might be. By the time I turned 29, I had been promoted twice, purchased my own condominium in the city, and established myself professionally. Dylan, at 24, was living in my parents' guest house between jobs for the 6th time, and still receiving a monthly allowance that exceeded what many people earned working full-time. 3 weeks before the accident, I had reluctantly attended a family dinner, where my parents proudly announced they had bought Dylan a brand new Tesla Model 3. "It's motivation for his new job search," my father explained, beaming as Dylan showed me pictures of the sleek white vehicle. "The company he's interviewing with values environmental consciousness." I nodded politely, not mentioning that I had saved for 3 years to afford my modestly priced hybrid. Dylan had never held a job longer than 5 months, but somehow deserved a $60,000 vehicle as motivation to possibly secure another position he would likely abandon before the year ended. "You should see how fast this baby can go," Dylan had said, scrolling through the Tesla's specs on his phone. 0 to 60 in 3.1 seconds. My mother had laughed indulgently. Just be careful, sweetie. We know how much you love testing the limits. I remember taking a long sip of wine to keep from commenting. Little did I know that those words would prove prophetic just 18 days later, setting in motion a family crisis that would finally force me to confront the toxic dynamic I had accepted for nearly 3 decades. I was in the middle of preparing for a client meeting when my phone lit up with my mother's call. This wasn't unusual. She often called during work hours despite knowing my schedule, but the frantic tone in her voice immediately sent warning signals. "Bernice, thank goodness you answered," she said, her words coming out in a rush. "There's been an accident. Dylan is okay, but we need your help right away." My stomach dropped. "What happened? Is he hurt?" No, he's fine, just shaken up. He was driving the Tesla and there was an accident. He hit 2 parked cars on Maple Street." I closed my eyes, already seeing where this was headed. "Was anyone in the cars? Is everyone all right?" "The cars were empty, thank God, but there's quite a bit of damage. The Tesla's front end is completely smashed, and the other vehicles, well, one might be totaled." I could hear muffled voices in the background, my father's deep tone rising authoritatively. "Mom, has he called the insurance company, the police?" A pause. "We're here now. Dad arrived first. The police are on their way, but Bernice, we need to ask you something important." That feeling of dread intensified. "What is it?" My mother lowered her voice. "Dylan's had those 2 speeding tickets this year already, and his insurance would skyrocket. Plus, the officer who's coming thinks he might have been, well, there was a lunch with friends beforehand, and he might have had a drink or 2. "Are you saying he was driving under the influence?" I asked, my voice sharper than intended. "No. Well, maybe slightly over the limit, we're not sure. But if that's the case with his record, he could lose his license. That job prospect would vanish immediately." I stood from my desk, unable to remain seated. "Mom, what exactly are you asking me?" Another pause, longer this time. I heard my father's voice again. Then my mother came back on the line. "We need you to say you were driving. Your record is clean, your insurance has that perfect driver discount. It would just be on paper, sweetie. No one was hurt. It's just a matter of paperwork and insurance." The request landed like a physical blow. I actually pulled the phone away from my ear and stared at it for a moment before responding. "You want me to claim I was driving Dylan's car to lie to the police and insurance company? That's fraud, Mom." "Don't use that word," she hissed. "It's just a family helping each other out. You know how hard Dylan's been trying lately. This would derail everything he's working toward." I thought of the everything my brother had been working toward, primarily perfecting his golf swing at the country club using our parents' membership, and occasionally sending out resumes that he had paid someone else to write. "This is crossing a line," I said firmly. "I can't do that. Bernice, please. Your father and I have always been there for you. We paid for your braces, your college application fees, helped with your first apartment security deposit. We're only asking for this one thing." The manipulation was so transparent it almost made me laugh. Those things were basic parental responsibilities, while they had given Dylan Carr's endless tuition payments for schools he never completed. And now a Tesla he had promptly crashed. "I'm sorry, but I need to think about this. It's not a small thing you're asking. I'll leave work now and come to the scene, but I'm not promising anything." "Hurry," my mother urged. "The police officer will be here any minute and we need to present a united front." I ended the call, told my boss there was a family emergency, and drove the 30 minutes to my parents' suburb with my thoughts racing. The audacity of what they were asking stunned me, yet a lifetime of conditioning had me questioning whether I was overreacting. Was this just what families did for each other? Or was this the culmination of a pattern, where Dylan's needs always trumped everything else, including the law and my own well-being? By the time I arrived at the scene on Maple Street, I had worked myself into a state of righteous anger that quickly dissolved into anxiety when I saw the actual damage. The sleek white Tesla had its entire front end crushed with the hood accordioned up toward the windshield. Nearby, a blue Honda Civic had been pushed up onto the curb, its driver's side caved in. Beyond that, a silver Audi had damage to its rear bumper and trunk. Dylan was leaning against a tree, looking irritated rather than remorseful, as my father talked intensely to him. My mother rushed over as I got out of my car. "Thank goodness you're here. The officer just arrived and is assessing the scene before taking statements." I could smell alcohol on my brother's breath when I approached him. "What happened?" I asked, keeping my voice low. He shrugged a gesture so casual it made my blood boil. "These streets are too narrow. I was trying out the acceleration and the car got away from me a bit. It's not as big a deal as they're making it." The complete lack of accountability stunned me. "You could have killed someone, Dylan." "But I didn't," he replied with an eye roll. "Now Mom and Dad are freaking out about insurance and my record. They said you'll help out by saying you were driving." "And you think that's a reasonable request?" He finally looked directly at me. "Come on, Bernie. It's not like it affects you much. Your insurance goes up a big deal. If they pin this on me with the breathalyzer and my record, I'm screwed for years." "Maybe there should be consequences for once," I said immediately, regretting engaging with his warped logic. My father approached, clapping a hand on my shoulder. "Officer Miller is ready to take statements. We've explained that you were driving Bernice and Dylan was in the passenger seat." "I haven't agreed to that," I said, shrugging his hand off. "This isn't the time for one of your stands," he said in the dismissive tone he'd used throughout my childhood. "This is family. We take care of our own." "By committing fraud," I whispered fiercely. "By protecting your brother's future," my mother interjected. "One mistake shouldn't define his life." I looked between them, these people who had raised me but somehow viewed my integrity as disposable. "I need a minute," I said, walking away toward the end of the block. My mind flashed back to high school, when Dylan had been caught with marijuana in his backpack. He had convinced my parents that it belonged to me, that I had asked him to hold it. I had been grounded for a month, lost my position on the debate team, and endured a humiliating lecture about responsibility from my father. I had accepted the punishment without protest because my parents made it clear that Dylan's baseball scholarship prospects couldn't withstand a drug incident. Now, a decade later, they were asking me to sacrifice my integrity again. When I returned to the scene, the officer was photographing the damage. My parents immediately flanked me, their expressions a mixture of expectation and warning. "It'll just be some paperwork," my mother whispered. "We'll cover any increase in your insurance premiums. It'll all blow over in a few months." "This is the last time we'll ask for something like this," my father added, though we all knew that was a lie. The police officer approached, notebook in hand. "I understand you were the driver of the Tesla," he asked me directly. I felt 3 sets of eyes boring into me. In that moment, the weight of family expectation and 30 years of conditioning won out over my better judgment. "Yes," I said quietly. "I was driving." The words tasted like betrayal, not of my family, but of myself. As I signed the police report stating I had been behind the wheel, I felt something inside me break. The drive home was silent and heavy with regret. The days following the accident unfolded like a slow-motion nightmare, as the full implications of what I'd done began to sink in. The morning after I received the first of many calls from the insurance company, the representative asked detailed questions about the accident that I struggled to answer convincingly. How fast was I going? What distracted me? Had I used the Tesla's autopilot feature? Each lie built upon the previous one, creating a precarious tower of deception that I knew could collapse at any moment. After that call, I spent my lunch break researching the potential consequences of insurance fraud. What I discovered sent ice through my veins. This wasn't just about higher premiums. Insurance fraud was a criminal offense that could result in fines, probation, or even jail time. As a licensed accountant whose career depended on a reputation for integrity and trustworthiness, a fraud conviction would be professionally devastating. "You look like you've seen a ghost," my coworker Amara commented when I returned to my desk. Amara and I had started at the firm together 5 years ago and had become close friends. I hesitated before responding. I hadn't told anyone about the situation, partly out of shame and partly because speaking it aloud would make it more real. But I needed perspective from someone outside my family's distorted reality. "If I tell you something, can you promise to keep it between us?" I asked. Amara nodded, her expression turning serious. She closed the door to our shared office and sat down across from me. I told her everything, the Tesla, the accident, my parents' manipulation, and my moment of weakness in agreeing to take the blame. As I spoke, saying the series of events out loud made me realize how absurd and wrong the situation truly was. Bernice, Amara said when I finished, this is serious, really serious. You need to fix this before it goes any further. I know, I admitted. But how do I walk it back now? The police report is filed. I've already spoken to the insurance company. Better to correct it now than wait until they investigate further, she advised. My brother Jordan is an attorney who specializes in insurance cases. You should talk to him. That evening, I received a notification that my car insurance premium had already increased by 30% due to the accident. When I called my parents to tell them, expecting them to make good on their promise to cover the difference, they were vague and noncommittal. We'll figure something out once everything settles, my father said dismissively. These things take time to sort out. Meanwhile, Dylan had already moved on from the accident with stunning indifference. He posted photos on social media of himself shopping for a replacement vehicle with the caption, "Upgrade time, accidents happen for a reason." There was no acknowledgement of the damage he'd caused, the lies he was perpetuating, or the position he'd put me in. 3 days after the accident, my parents invited me to dinner. I assumed they wanted to discuss the insurance situation, but instead, I arrived to find them celebrating. They had already purchased Dylan a replacement vehicle, not another Tesla, but a high-end Audi Q5. We figured the Tesla technology might be too tempting for aggressive driving, my mother explained as Dylan showed off the features of his new SUV. This is more stable, better for everyday use. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So he crashes a $60,000 car, while possibly intoxicated, lies about it, puts my career and reputation at risk, and gets rewarded with another luxury vehicle. My mother looked offended. We're not rewarding him. He needs reliable transportation for job interviews. The same job interviews he's been supposedly having for the past year, I asked. You're being unfair, my father interjected. Dylan is making progress. This negativity isn't helping anyone. What isn't helping is me taking the blame for something I didn't do, I said, finding my voice. I want to correct the record with the insurance company and the police. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. You can't do that, my father said firmly. The paperwork is filed. Changing your story now would raise red flags about insurance fraud. It is insurance fraud, I insisted. That's the problem. Only if they find out, Dylan said with a shrug, scrolling through his phone. As if this conversation about his actions was merely a boring inconvenience, I turned to him, fury building. Do you even care what position you've put me in? My insurance rates have already gone up. If this investigation goes deeper, I could lose my accounting license. My entire career could be ruined. You're being dramatic, he replied without looking up. It's a fender bender, not a murder cover-up. Actually, it was 3 cars with major damage, possible DUI, and definitely insurance fraud, I corrected him. My mother intervened. Bernice, we're family. Families protect each other. Your brother would do the same for you. I laughed out loud at that. Would he, when has Dylan ever taken responsibility for anything, let alone taken blame for someone else? That's enough, my father snapped. We've made our decision as a family. The matter is closed. I looked around at their faces. My father's stern authority, my mother's manipulative concern, and Dylan's complete apathy. In that moment, I saw with perfect clarity that I was not truly considered part of this family, except when it served their needs. The breaking point came during Sunday dinner the following weekend. My parents had insisted I attend, promising we would discuss the insurance premium issue. Instead, it turned into another celebration of Dylan, who announced he had received a callback for a job at a prestigious marketing firm. They were really impressed with my portfolio, he boasted. The creative director said my ideas were revolutionary. That's wonderful, sweetheart, my mother gushed. I knew this fresh start was exactly what you needed. I pushed my food around my plate silently until Dylan made a joke that made my blood boil. Maybe I should put excellent driver on my resume too, he quipped with a wink in my direction, since that's what my record shows. My parents actually laughed at his reference to the lie that was causing me mounting anxiety and financial consequences. I set down my fork with a clatter. I'm glad you all find this so amusing. My career and reputation are at stake, but sure, Let's make jokes about it. Lighten up, Bernie, Dylan said. It's not that serious. Something inside me snapped. Not serious for you, maybe. You got a brand new car out of this while I'm fielding calls from insurance investigators and watching my premiums skyrocket. Not to mention committing a crime that could get me disbarred from my profession. No one is going to find out unless you keep talking about it, my father said sternly. That investigator who called me yesterday seemed pretty determined, I countered. He had questions about why the Tesla was registered to Dylan if I was driving it. A flash of concern finally crossed my father's face. What did you tell him? That Dylan had just purchased it and we were taking turns driving it to see if I wanted to buy one too, I said. Another lie to cover the original lie. How many more will I need to tell? As many as necessary, my mother said quietly. That's what we do for family. I stood up from the table. No, that's what you do for Dylan. I'm done. I'm going to tell the truth. You'll do no such thing, my father said, his voice rising. If you do, you're no longer welcome in this house. I looked at him in disbelief. You'd disown me for refusing to continue committing fraud for Dylan. I'd disown you for betraying this family, he replied coldly. I grabbed my purse and walked out, ignoring my mother's calls to come back and discuss this rationally. There was nothing rational about any of it. The final straw came the next morning when I received another call from the insurance investigator, asking me to come in person to answer some inconsistencies in my statement. I knew then that the house of cards was about to collapse. I had a choice: continue lying and potentially face serious consequences, or tell the truth and face my family's wrath. The decision was becoming clearer by the minute. We need to talk about your options, said Jordan Amara's brother, as we sat in his downtown law office the following evening. He was younger than I expected, maybe mid-30s, but his demeanor was confidence-inspiring as he reviewed the details I had shared. How serious is this really? I asked, hoping against hope that I had overestimated the severity. Jordan leaned forward, clasping his hands on his desk. Insurance fraud is a criminal offense, Bernice. In this state, it can be classified as a felony depending on the dollar amount involved. Given the value of 3 damaged vehicles, including a Tesla, we're definitely in felony territory. My stomach dropped. What kind of consequences are we talking about? Worst case scenario, jail time, though. That's unlikely for a first offense with no injuries involved. More realistic consequences include substantial fines, probation, and a permanent criminal record. He paused, his expression sympathetic but serious. For an accountant, the professional consequences could be more devastating than the legal ones. The state board would likely suspend or revoke your license. I felt the blood drain from my face. I could lose my career over this. Yes, he said simply. The licensing board takes fraud very seriously, as you'd expect. Your firm would almost certainly terminate your employment once charges were filed. I put my head in my hands. I knew it was wrong, but I didn't realize how severe the consequences could be. Many people don't, Jordan assured me. That's why families like yours think it's no big deal to file a false insurance claim. They see it as victimless, just getting money from a faceless corporation. They don't consider the legal implications. So what do I do now? Jordan took a deep breath. The cleanest approach is to come forward voluntarily before the investigation goes any further. Contact both the insurance company and the police department, explain that you were pressured into making a false statement, and correct the record. Won't I still face consequences for the initial lie? Possibly, but coming forward voluntarily carries significant weight. Insurance companies and prosecutors have discretion. If you're proactive, show remorse, and cooperate fully, there's a good chance they'll be lenient, especially since you're not the one who caused the accident. I nodded, absorbing his advice. And what about my brother and parents? Will they face consequences too? They could. Pressuring someone to file a false claim is also illegal. However, proving that might be difficult unless they admit it. The focus would likely remain on determining who was actually driving. I thought about this for a long moment. Despite everything, I didn't want my parents to face legal trouble. But I also couldn't continue to sacrifice my future for Dylan's continuous mistakes. What would you do if you were me? I asked finally. Jordan considered the question carefully. I'd write a detailed letter to my parents explaining my decision and why it's necessary. I'd make it clear that I'm not doing this to hurt them, but to protect myself. Then I'd contact the insurance company and correct my statement. That evening, I followed his advice. I spent hours drafting and redrafting a letter to my parents, trying to balance firmness with compassion. I explained the legal and professional consequences I faced if I continued with the lie. I detailed how this pattern of covering for Dylan had been damaging to both him and our family dynamics. I expressed love for them, but made it clear that I would no longer participate in this deception. I sent the letter by email to both my parents and waited for the explosion. It came within minutes in the form of a phone call from my father. "Are you out of your mind?" he demanded without preamble. "Do you have any idea what you'll do to this family if you go through with this?" "I know exactly what will happen," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Dylan will finally face consequences for his actions, and I'll protect my career and integrity." "You'd throw your brother under the bus to save yourself?" he asked incredulously. "That's not what this is, Dad. I'm refusing to be thrown under the bus for him." "There's a difference." My mother grabbed the phone. "Bernice, please reconsider. We can work this out as a family. Maybe we can pay your insurance increase for a full year, not just a few months." The fact that she thought this was about money showed how little she understood. This isn't about money. It's about doing what's right and breaking a toxic pattern. "Family loyalty is what's right," she insisted. "Not when it involves criminal activity," I countered. My father took the phone back. "If you do this, don't expect any financial help from us ever again. That condo you're so proud of, remember who helped with the down payment." This was a deliberate misrepresentation. They had contributed $5,000 toward my down payment, a small fraction of the total, and far less than they spent on Dylan in a typical month. "If that's your position, I'll pay you back the $5,000, I said calmly. "My integrity isn't for sale, especially not at that price." Dylan got on the line next. "You're such a sanctimonious bitch," he spat. "You've always been jealous of me." "Jealous?" I repeated, genuinely baffled. "Of what exactly? Your inability to hold a job, your lack of independence, your zero accountability lifestyle." "Of how Mom and Dad love me more," he said smugly. "They always have, and you know it." His words should have hurt, but instead they clarified everything. "You're right," I said quietly. "They've always favored you. And look what it's done to you. You're 24 years old living in their guest house, unable to maintain employment or relationships, and you just crashed a luxury vehicle while intoxicated. If that's what their version of love produces, I'm better off without it." I ended the call and blocked their numbers temporarily. I needed space to do what came next. The following morning, I called the insurance investigator and requested an in-person meeting. With Jordan's coaching, I explained that I had been pressured by family to make a false statement, that I had not been driving the Tesla, and that I wanted to correct the record despite potential consequences for myself. The investigator, a middle-aged woman named Sandra, listened without interruption. When I finished, she surprised me by saying, "Thank you for your honesty, Ms. Hamilton. This happens more often than you might think. Families pressuring each other to lie about who is driving is unfortunately common." "What happens now?" I asked nervously. "We'll update our investigation based on your new statement. We'll need to interview your brother and potentially your parents. There may still be consequences for filing the initial false report, but your voluntary correction will be noted prominently." As I left her office, I felt a strange mixture of anxiety and relief. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in days, I could breathe without the crushing weight of deception on my chest. The following weeks brought the confrontation and consequences I had expected, but also surprising developments I hadn't anticipated. 3 days after my meeting with the insurance investigator, my parents called an emergency family meeting at their house. Despite my better judgment, I agreed to attend, bringing Amara along for moral support. She waited in the car, promising to check on me if I wasn't out in an hour. My parents and Dylan were waiting in the living room, their expressions a mix of anger and strategic pleasantness. My mother had clearly been crying, her eyes red-rimmed and puffy, while my father maintained his stern attorney demeanor. Dylan slouched in an armchair scrolling through his phone until my father sharply told him to put it away. "We wanted to talk reasonably as a family," my father began once I was seated. The insurance company called us today. They're opening a formal investigation and requiring Dylan to come in for questioning. The police have also contacted us about updating their report. My mother added, her voice thin and strained. This is escalating exactly as we feared. All because you couldn't keep your mouth shut, Dylan muttered. I looked at each of them in turn. Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences? A Tesla and 2 other cars were damaged? That's hundreds of thousands of dollars in claims. We could have handled it quietly, my father insisted. Now there's talk of possible DUI charges based on witness statements about Dylan's condition. I felt a flash of vindication. So there had been witnesses who noticed his intoxication. Then it's good this is coming to light. Driving under the influence is serious. He could have killed someone. Oh, stop being so dramatic, Dylan snapped. My blood alcohol was probably just slightly over the limit. Which is still illegal, I pointed out, and still dangerous. My mother leaned forward, adopting her nurturing expression that I now recognized as manipulative. Bernice, sweetie, it's not too late. You could tell them you were confused, that you panicked because of the accident investigation. Say you actually were driving but got nervous about the potential costs. I stared at her in disbelief. You want me to change my story again? That would make things worse, not better. What's worse is you destroying this family, my father said, his voice rising. After everything we've done for you. What exactly have you done for me that compares to what you've done for Dylan? I asked, genuinely curious about their perspective. My father looked momentarily thrown by the directness of the question. We paid for your education. You paid for my undergraduate degree, yes, just like you paid for Dylan's multiple attempted degrees that he never completed. I worked through college and paid for my own master's degree. We helped with your condo down payment, my mother interjected. You contributed $5,000 to my down payment after giving Dylan a $60,000 car. Before that, a $40,000 Jeep. Before that, paying his rent for years while he found himself. The math doesn't add up, Mom. My father's face reddened. Is that what this is about, money? You're jealous of what we've given Dylan? This is about accountability and integrity, I corrected him. But since you brought it up, yes, there's been a clear disparity in how you've treated us financially. The real question is why? Why does Dylan deserve endless support while I'm expected to be self-sufficient? Why is his future more important than mine? My mother began to cry again. That's not fair. We love you both equally. But you don't treat us equally, I pointed out. And now you're asking me to commit a crime to protect him yet again. You should be willing to do that for family, my father said firmly. Family works both ways, I countered. Would any of you be willing to take the blame if I caused an accident? Would you risk your career and reputation for me? The silence that followed was deafening. My father finally broke it with an unexpected revelation. You know we had set up college funds for both of you when you were born, equal amounts. But you got scholarships and we didn't need to use much of yours. I waited for him to continue, sensing there was more. We used what was left of your fund to help Dylan when he needed it. For his tuition, his apartment, eventually part of his first car. The betrayal of this casual admission stunned me. You used my college fund for Dylan money that was specifically set aside for me. My mother jumped in. You didn't need it, sweetheart. You were doing so well on your own. So I was punished for being responsible, for earning scholarships and working hard. No one was punished, my father said dismissively. We just allocated resources where they were needed most. In that moment, the pattern of my entire life crystallized with perfect clarity. My independence hadn't been a choice. It had been a necessity, because my parents had redirected my resources to Dylan. My academic and professional achievements hadn't freed up family funds as a happy coincidence. They had been the plan all along. I stood up. I'm done. I'm done with the manipulation, the double standards, and the gaslighting. I've corrected my statement with the insurance company and the police, and I won't change it again. If you leave now, don't expect any relationship with this family going forward, my father threatened. That's your choice, I said calmly. But I won't set myself on fire to keep Dylan warm anymore. As I walked toward the door, my mother called after me. The stress of all this is affecting my health. My blood pressure is through the roof. Is that what you want? I paused, recognizing this as yet another manipulation tactic. What I want is a family that values truth and accountability. When you're ready for that, you know how to reach me." I left without looking back, the weight of 30 years of dysfunctional family dynamics finally lifting from my shoulders. The consequences unfolded rapidly after that. The insurance company completed their investigation, finding definitively that Dylan had been driving and was at fault. Witnesses from a nearby restaurant confirmed seeing him driving erratically, and that he appeared intoxicated when exiting the vehicle. Dylan's license was suspended for 6 months. He received a substantial fine and was sentenced to 50 hours of community service for the DUI. My parents faced no legal consequences, but their insurance premiums reportedly tripled, and they had to pay a significant portion of the damages out of pocket after their policy limits were reached. The marketing firm that had been considering Dylan withdrew their job offer following the background check that revealed the incident. My parents blamed me for this, of course, rather than recognizing it as a natural consequence of his actions. For several weeks, I had no contact with my immediate family. I threw myself into work, began seeing a therapist to process the emotional aftermath, and strengthened friendships that had taken a backseat to family drama for too long. The first crack in the estrangement came from an unexpected source. My Aunt Lisa, my mother's sister, called me out of the blue one evening. "I heard what happened," she said without preamble. "Your mother gave me her version, but I wanted to hear yours." I hesitantly shared the events, expecting her to defend my parents as she usually did. To my surprise, she sighed deeply when I finished. "This pattern has been going on since you were children," she acknowledged. "I've tried to point it out to your mother over the years, but she can't see it. The dynamic was similar in our own childhood. She was the favored one, much like Dylan." This insight into my family history was illuminating. "So it's generational," I said. "Patterns often are unless someone has the courage to break them," she replied, "which is exactly what you're doing, Bernice. It's painful and messy, but necessary." Her validation meant more than I could express. For the first time, a family member was acknowledging the reality I had experienced rather than denying it. "Have you spoken to them lately?" I asked. "Yes, just yesterday. They're struggling with the financial implications, but more than that, they're struggling with the loss of control. Your refusal to play your assigned role has thrown the entire family system into chaos." "Are they ready to acknowledge any responsibility?" She laughed softly. "Not yet. Your mother still casts you as the villain in this story. But Dylan, interestingly enough, has been quieter lately. Less entitled in his demands, more reflective." This surprised me. "Really?" "Don't get too excited," she cautioned. "He's still Dylan. But consequences have a way of initiating growth, however reluctant." 2 days later, I received a text message from Dylan. "I still think you overreacted, but I get why you were mad. Sorry if it messed up your insurance or whatever." It was hardly a profound apology, but coming from someone who had never acknowledged wrongdoing in his life, it was noteworthy. I replied simply, "Thank you for that. I hope you're doing okay." My parents remained more resistant. My mother sent occasional texts about family events I was choosing to miss, and my father maintained complete silence. I maintained my boundaries, making it clear that a relationship moving forward would require acknowledgement of the unhealthy patterns and commitment to change. 6 months after the Tesla incident, my life had transformed in ways both challenging and profoundly positive. The immediate professional consequences I had feared did not materialize. The insurance company, satisfied with my voluntary correction and cooperation, chose not to pursue fraud charges against me. My employer, who I had proactively informed about the situation, appreciated my transparency and ethical choice, even telling me that my handling of the situation demonstrated exactly the kind of integrity the firm valued. Therapy had become an essential part of my healing process. Each week, I unpacked another layer of family conditioning that had shaped my self-perception and relationships. I began to recognize patterns I had internalized: the belief that I had to earn love through achievement, the tendency to take responsibility for others' problems, the deep-seated feeling that my needs were secondary. Family systems are powerful, my therapist, Dr. Lauren, explained during one particularly insightful session. You were assigned the role of the responsible one, the one who sacrifices from early childhood. Breaking out of that role threatens the entire system, which is why the pushback was so intense. I still feel guilty sometimes, I admitted, like I betrayed them. That's the conditioning talking, she replied gently. You chose truth and healthy boundaries. That's not betrayal, it's growth. Professionally, I continued to thrive. 3 months after the incident, I received a promotion I had been working toward, becoming the youngest senior manager in my department. The achievement felt sweeter, knowing it was built on a foundation of integrity rather than compromise. My social circle transformed as well. Without the constant drain of family drama, I had more energy for friendships and personal interests. Amara remained a steadfast support, but I also connected with a group of women in my building who gathered weekly for dinner and conversation. For the first time in my adult life, I felt part of a community that valued me without conditions or expectations. My relationship with my immediate family evolved into a careful, limited contact arrangement. My mother eventually stopped trying to guilt me into family gatherings and began sending briefer, less manipulative texts. My father broke his silence after 4 months with a terse email acknowledging that perhaps things could have been handled differently regarding the accident, not quite an apology, but a small step. Dylan's evolution was the most surprising. The loss of his license forced him to rely on public transportation for his community service assignments, exposing him to a world outside his privileged bubble. He eventually found employment at a small graphic design firm, not the prestigious marketing position he'd lost, but legitimate work that he surprisingly maintained. The boss is actually cool, he told me during one of our occasional text exchanges. Says I have talent but need discipline. First time anyone's expected me to actually show up consistently. When his license was reinstated, my parents offered to help him purchase another car. To everyone's shock, he declined, saying he would save up for something himself. It was a small step toward independence, but significant given his history. My Aunt Lisa became an unexpected ally and bridge to the family. We began meeting monthly for coffee, and through her, I stayed peripherally informed about family matters without direct engagement in the dysfunction. She shared family stories and history that helped me understand the generational patterns at play and gave me compassion for my parents, even as I maintained boundaries with them. Your grandmother did the same with your mother, that your parents did with Dylan, she explained during one of our conversations. Created a golden child who never had to face consequences. The pattern goes back at least 3 generations that I know of. But you broke it, I observed. She smiled sadly. In my own way, yes. By not having children, partly because I feared replicating what I experienced. You're breaking it more courageously by creating healthy boundaries, while still remaining open to relationship on new terms. The holidays presented the first major test of my resolve. I declined the traditional family Thanksgiving at my parents' home instead, hosting a Friendsgiving with Amara, her brother Jordan, and several other friends who weren't traveling home. The day was filled with laughter, honest conversation, and none of the tension that had characterized family holidays throughout my life. For Christmas, I agreed to a brief lunch with my parents and Dylan at a neutral restaurant rather than an extended stay at the family home. The 2-hour meeting was awkward but civil, with everyone carefully avoiding mention of the accident or its aftermath. It wasn't healing exactly, but it was a tentative first step toward a new type of relationship, one based on my terms rather than their expectations. As the 6-month mark approached, I sat on my apartment balcony one evening, reflecting on the journey. The painful confrontation had catalyzed changes I had been unable to make through years of quiet resentment and accommodation. By refusing to continue the pattern of sacrifice and enabling, I had not only protected my professional integrity, but had also perhaps given my brother the opportunity to finally grow up. Most importantly, I had discovered that family love shouldn't require the sacrifice of your integrity, your future, or your self-respect. True love builds up rather than diminishes supports, rather than exploits and respects boundaries, rather than trampling them. The path forward remained uncertain. I had no illusions that my parents would suddenly transform their perspective, or that Dylan would become fully self-sufficient overnight. Generational patterns run deep and change comes slowly when it comes at all. But I had found a precious equilibrium between compassion and boundaries, between family connection and personal well-being. As I watched the sunset paint the city skyline in shades of gold and purple, I felt a deep sense of peace. The crisis that had seemed like the end of my world had actually been the beginning of a new one, a world where I valued myself enough to stand in my truth, where I surrounded myself with people who respected my boundaries, and where love was no longer conditional on sacrifice. My story isn't over, and healing rarely follows a neat linear path. There will be setbacks and difficult conversations ahead. But for perhaps the first time in my life, I'm facing the future on my own terms with clarity about who I am and what I deserve. And that knowledge makes all the difference. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between family loyalty and your own integrity? How did you navigate that challenging balance? I'd love to hear your stories and how you've handled similar family dynamics. Please leave a comment below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if this story resonated with you. Remember that setting healthy boundaries isn't selfish. It's essential for your well-being and sometimes for the growth of those you love. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I hope my experience helps you navigate your own family challenges with courage and self-compassion.